Welcome, trainers, to the Pokésphere. We're your destination for in-depth Pokemon news, community discussions, and editorial content. We're passionate about this franchise, and we're here to share our insights and connect with fellow fans. So let's talk gaming. So we have, on several occasions, brought up the whole stop killing games movement and digital rights ownership and things of the nature of like key cards and our disdain for how it seems the industry has been handling consumer and consumer rights. And so, if you've not been aware, there has been a movement in Europe called Stop Killing Games or Stop Destroying Games, depending on what you're looking up. So the Stop Killing Games movement was started by someone who goes by the name of Accursed Farms, also known as Ross Scott. And his whole deal was that he saw a massive problem with how digital games and just games in general were being handled, especially in light of the incidents that happened with The Crew, which was a game that people had purchased and then was removed, taken away, and their hard-earned money was basically evaporated overnight because the game in itself shut down. Now, over the last 2 years, I think, we've been following along and making regular updates to when things changed. And once again, in the last couple of weeks, we have seen some massive movement. First and foremost, in the whole sphere that is the Stop Killing Games movement, they met up with the parliamentary body of the European Union and spent quite a bit of time talking to all the representatives that were there. And to the delight of myself as well as other people, the union as a whole seemed to really resonate with the message that Ross Scott was trying to convey about how predatory this type of practice can be. And so it's looking like it may have a favorable outcome. However, we would have to wait until July to really get any more information as far as they're concerned. But they posed a very strong argument as for why this needs to be addressed.
So, I mean, I watched the EU address or meeting, whatever you want to call it, and I think he did a very good job. Was very articulated. I think he did fall a little bit flat in some areas, where he had to answer questions that I sort of thought he wasn't really prepared for. He did sort of stutter and stumble his words, but I think overall his message was very strong, and I think it's a big win for gamers as a whole. Because I mean, if you take, I think one of the examples he used was The Crew being essentially nuked off of the face of the earth for everyone who had bought it digitally, and that really resonated with me because I was pretty upset when that happened, because I'm a car guy. I like cars. I like car games. And that was genuinely one of my favorite games, and it's a bit saddened to see it. So obviously we can get more into that a little bit later. But as far as the movement goes, I think on an official platform, he did really well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Chase said earlier. Dude did what he did on that little press conference kind of thing. And yeah, I think it was just handled pretty professionally.
The curve, the game that you guys were talking about, I did own that too on my PlayStation Compressor Adventure Day. I'm a big fan of basically like Need for Speed, and there's one other. So it kind of sucks that they removed it. Nobody bought it, but our hard-earned money looks it, and for them to remove it, it's just nothing we can do about it.
I mean, I think that's the point right now of the Stop Killing Games movement, is that there is something that we can do about it, and that very thing is actually currently happening. I mean, I hope this trickles down to many other things in society that is to be brought up here. But if you buy access to something and it gets removed, like, you either have to establish that this is being a limited time thing. They have to provide this service forever. Otherwise, you hiring a contractor to replace your roof, they rip it off and say, you know what, we're just dissolving the company.
That was one of the comparisons that he did draw, is if like you buy a movie or you buy a book, that DVD or movie or whatever, and the book someone's not just going to walk into your house and come and take them out of your home one day randomly and say, sorry, you can't ever watch this or read this.
Well, I mean, that being said, and in a move that was absolutely amazing to hear, is that not only is the EU seriously considering this and siding on the side of gamers, because as it turns out, a lot of those members of parliament actually are gamers and have had similar issues with how things have been handled as far as the digital purchasing and then removal of games. But even now, we're looking at the fact the state of California, which is basically considered the fourth largest global economy, has put forth a new bill called the name AB 1921, which is the Protect Our Games Act. Now, this would only apply to server-connected digital games that are going to be purchased on or after the 1st of January of 2027. This has to actually pass, so they're hoping to get it by the new year, which is wonderful. Now, this would require gaming companies to provide a 60-day in-game and online warning prior to shutting down of servers. They also require a mandatory post-support solution. Basically, once the servers are taken down, they have several options that they can explore. Number one being an independently functioning offline version of the game. Number two is a patch or update enabling the game to be played without server connectivity. Or number three, a full refund of the purchase price. On top of all of that, companies are prohibited from selling a game within 2 months of its end-of-life date. And that, I think, is the biggest thing about this. Now, the bill in itself does hold some exclusion. Free-to-play games, subscription-based games like World of Warcraft. Anything you can download for free and then just pay a monthly subscription isn't going to be covered for this. But for the most part, anything else that you have to purchase just to play, and then, that is their main target and their main goal. So I think that fact that California is going to push this is wonderful to start. But also, the fact that the EU is looking on this very favorably and California is now looking to pass a similar law, this, between the two, I think this could actually rebuild the gaming industry for the betterment of all consumers. Not to mention the fact that it's easier for game companies to comply with laws when they're this broad between different countries. It's just easier for them to fix it from the very start, which is the argument that Ross Scott has actually made, was if it's going to be difficult to build this into games that already exist if they weren't designed for it. However, if you build with this already in mind, it isn't an issue. It's just part of your building process. You're just setting up the framework for it when it happens. And so I'm really hopeful about this. But again, I throw it back to you guys. What are your thoughts about this bill, from California, that may actually help force gaming companies to capitulate, to basically serve the consumers better than they have been?
I actually would say the rebound. The last point that you just made there, Draco, about them starting to build games with this in mind is going to cause a massive insurgence of premium games. Why should, even if it is a limited story, say a Final Fantasy game, why would I sell you that up front at the risk and liability of the backlash if it's a server-based, I forgot which Final Fantasy that was, 14? Whatever, doesn't matter, you get my point. And then I can cut that out. Or I could release a game, say, you get the digital version automatically and all it does is show you a title screen, and maybe you get to run around an intro town. If you want to play anything else, you have to start paying a premium experience to actually play through the storyline. Now this protects companies from the backlash of that bill, if it does pass, far more money, because not everyone pays attention to the subscriptions that are coming out of their bank account.
So I think there is a distinction between, like, what I think it was Final Fantasy 14. I think you were correct on that. And I think World of Warcraft would also fall into this category. So these subscription-based games, as opposed to something that I would consider different and be live service like Fortnite or Marvel Rivals, there will be, I'm sure, repercussions if, Bethesda, instead of making Skyrim 6 like the $70 or whatever it is and releasing the full game, they make it free, and for every town you want to pass through you have to pay $1 or whatever it is. So I think there is enough common sense that people would pick up on that very quickly. But also I think this California law passing is very contingent to what the EU does, because if California is the only one who passes this law, then realistically any studio outside of California or any studio within California could move out of California and then circumnavigate that law, whether that's not releasing the game in California, which would then make those communities suffer. I could see that being a possibility. But also, as far as the EU not adopting it, I mean, they have been pushing, specifically in the tech space, right to repair. They've been pushing very heavily, so much so that iPhone had to change their proprietary charging methods to a standardized charging method like USB-C, and now they pushing that consumers must be able to feasibly replace their own batteries without their own phone batteries without the use of any proprietary tools. And on the note of tools, the tools and methods must be made available. So it'll be going back to like the early to mid 2000s where, you know, if you drop your phone, it would break into a million pieces, put it back together. So with that parallel being drawn, I wouldn't see a world where it's unlikely that the EU doesn't come to some kind of consensus about this in the favor of but on Draco's note about them not necessarily being able to implement features to allow the games to be made offline currently, I think that's something that people need to understand, because I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding around this whole thing. Again, some people lack critical thinking and take things very, very literally. So I mean, everyone's gonna have to put a little bit of thought in it. And I think I will say, if it's something you're passionate about, you should try and support where you can. I don't know to support whether it's just signing the petitions or you can donate a little bit of something if you're able to towards the cause, because I can't assume that this is a very cheap endeavor at all.
All right.
Well, in my opinion, I'm not sure if they're gonna do more like this. It's gonna happen. So it's gonna affect a lot of like us gamers. Even if you're a casual gamer, for example, and if you want access to play like some of these games eventually, and then they shut down or they removed it, there's nothing we can do about it unless we own the physical copy of it. It's gonna affect the way how, I guess, in the future when we go buy a game, want to make sure we don't lose access to it, especially with digital on it, because we pretty sure we don't get any refunds back for digital, or it's just a physical copy and pay some money at least back out of it.
Well, should this law pass in California and gaming companies just start to do this on the regular just because it's easier, refunds for digital games would also be on the table now, as opposed to not now where you're kind of stuck.
Okay, my question is, okay, but I don't know about Nintendo, but PlayStation do not allow you cannot sell your account to people that owned by
Correct. Currently correct. But if this law passes and they try to remove a game like they did with The Crew, if it was a paid for game, this law would basically say, no, you either have to allow the game to exist in a workable offline mode, or you're going to have to give people a full refund, regardless if it's digital.
That's a big loss for the company, I think, then, if that's the case, right? I mean, I think hurrah to the players, I guess, if they could get their money back for something like that. But damn, that's kind of, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Because Sony, they make it complicated. Check your latest purchase and stuff. Let's say, for example, you buy a game, right? And then, for example, or use somebody of mine, he bought a game, he bought it, he didn't keep the receipt, and then for some reason it got removed on his secondary. He wanted to keep it because you can't get a refund if you don't have proof that you bought the game. Eventually, it was removed.
There's going to be a digital footprint, and this law would basically, they don't get a chance, they don't get the choice to play that game. They either, if this law is to pass and you live in California, if this law does pass, or if this bill does pass, their options are leave the game in a playable state or fully refund. No ifs, no ands, no buts. And if they do try to fight it, again, this being localized to California unless it's adopted across the nation, but then they're subject to California law, and that's something that most companies are going to try to avoid to begin with. And the cheapest option is to just basically back-end build their games for end-of-life options down the road.
Or like what Chase was saying earlier, like just move out of California or something, right? Or like not even just open up shop there or something, right?
Yeah, but do you know how many people are in California?
Yeah, but California versus the rest of the world. I mean, if the EU doesn't manage to pass it, then California is like a grain of rice in a 5 kg bag of rice.
Which actually was going to mention, this is already the case with things like Red Hat. On a separate topic altogether, California did pass a law that I don't agree with at all. And because of the nature of how Linux operates, Linux basically geolocks California out of the coding, so that system, that operating system, does not work within the state of California because of the law that passed in California that isn't applied to the rest of the world. And so in that case, that law kind of backfired on them. So I definitely see where you're coming from with that, with that perspective, and I don't disagree. A lot of this is going to be hinging on the EU passing that consumer right law. If it passes in the EU and it passes in California, there's a lot of pressure now on gaming companies, and it doesn't really matter where they're based off of if their overall bottom line is about to take a massive hit.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, it does get muddy because let's say, I don't know what studios are based in California, but let's say Joso AAA game development studio is in California. He decides to move out. Still, gives people access to his games in California. Let's say he's in like Singapore. It would then become very difficult to fight in my mind because I don't know how the states work, but I don't think California law would then be applicable to him. At the very least, would be only slightly applicable. So then he could just pull the games off and say, okay, we'll refund California, and just that be the end of it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. They would most likely just say, all right, cool, California is going to be excluded in this. You can't sell this in California. Everybody else can still buy it, but just not California. And just to throw it out there, X, you do make a really good point about the shovelware that would the free shovelware that would start cranking out just to try to make a buck and get around the law should it pass. But at the same time, those kinds of games don't generally tend to have a very good lifespan, and it's really rare to find something that someone's willing to spend money on. So in the long run, it may actually end up causing more harm than good for the company to just try and bang out nothing but freeware to get around the law, as opposed to, again, setting up a game where they can make money hand over fist based on just the title alone, Pokemon, and instead of just trying to get around it.
So, but you could always just structure the demo model under the demo is premium release, and then if you want the rest of the game, then you pay the price we would have charged you for the digital game anyways. Now it acts as though it was a free download game that has a premium option under a model that is basically the same payout as it was back in the day. It's only become susceptible to things like miners and stuff that are going to break through that wall without paying and gaining information in leaks, and we're seeing in the community already.
Yeah. So that was going to be something I touched upon as well. I think in X's example, that would sort of end up being very predatory, and I think the only way that could feasibly work in my mind, although it's a very awful way, is it would then be studios that are creating games for younger audience. Because I know, at least with my parents, they were very cautious about how money was spent, but like you get as like a little treat, they'd say, oh, do you want, well, we'll use V-Bucks for example, do you want me to buy you some V-Bucks, and you get a bit of V-Bucks. And I think that's how this could go if X's scenario does end up happening, because I think it's a lot more difficult to pull the wool over the eyes of people who are playing the more mature games. So like your Cyberpunks, Oblivions, GTAs.
No, that's a fair assessment. That is a fair assessment. I'm just thinking long-term strategy-wise, that's only going to help in the short term. But if this becomes a permanent fixture in the landscape, especially if the EU passes any kind of legislature, that is a gargantuan pool of money that they're just leaving on the table because they just don't want to capitulate to the law. But we've already seen that there are companies that are willing to already back-end build some kind of end-of-life service. As a matter of fact, the biggest offender, Ubisoft, with The Crew, has already announced that they have been building end-of-life services for, I believe, ironically, The Crew 2. They made an announcement just after Ross Scott posted his video about his talk with the EU.
Yeah, I think, can we actually just discuss how it's crazy that we've actually gotten to this point? Because I remember being a kid and every new issue of, I think it was PC Gamer, I think that was the name of the magazine. They would very often come with like demo discs just as a freebie, and now we're at the point of actually fighting to keep our games after how the industry was initially built up.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that they want control. They want to control the most amount of money per game, because honestly, GameStop and companies that came before GameStop, because I remember quite a few, they're making money off of the reused market. You know, why am I going to spend $50 on a brand new game when I can spend $30 on a used game and it works just as well? And I think that was where all of this spawned from. So if a physical copy can be sold and resold, then we need to find a way to make it so that people will buy the physical not buy the physical copies, but at least if they're going to buy physical copies, buy them when it comes out, not 5-6 years later when they're cheap at GameStop. And what we've seen is games that have been offered as a digital at a digital price tag for the exact same price. We've seen games where you have to connect to the internet in order for you to finish downloading the entire game, if it's, you know, or unlock it at the very least. And even now with Nintendo's Game Key, all it is digital with extra steps. And the minute those servers go offline, you now have nothing but a paperweight, because you have no way of being able to access those games if they need to be checked online. And this is where all of this is coming from. You know, when we were growing up, we had Nintendo, Super Nintendo. They were not connected to the internet. There was no DRM. There was no way of checking anything. This is all really comes down to just about greed and control.
It's just ridiculous. Actually, my GameCube connected to the internet. Thank you very much. Although there wasn't really a point, but I still had the adapter pack.
Technically, the Dreamcast did too. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's coming back to it's come to a point where you've got people who are totally okay with digital copies being completely removed from their system, and then there are those who are fighting for everyone to be able to just keep what they pay for, because especially in the times that we live in right now, the way the economy is, you know, pennies count. Ironically, I use that phrase. But, you know, in this day and age where everything has gone up in price because of the current climate of things, and the cost of living is becoming just egregious as it is, entertainment has become a massive premium. And if you're spending money on a product, digital or physical, you should have the right to keep playing it as you see fit, and not have someone else dictate how long you're allowed to actually utilize it. Considering that, you know, we purchase many different things that do not have the same terms of service, but are treated in the exact same light, you know. Computers, televisions, home appliances, convenience things. We buy these things. They don't have an end of life term. They work until they break. You can go fix them if you can. And if the parts aren't available, or you just don't want to deal with it, then you go on and get the next iteration. But no one comes in and takes that stuff away from you when they decide they no longer want to support it. So why are games, which are effectively the exact same thing, treated in the same light?
Yeah, I think in my mind, for this to actually work, platforms like, the only real platform I can think of is platforms I can think of are like Steam, Epic Games. I think the EA version is called EA Access or something. I think they'll have to adopt what GOG does. I think it's GOG that gives you like offline installers.
Yes.
Yep.
Because it's all well and good, these laws coming about, but if tomorrow Steam goes bankrupt and has to switch off their servers, you lose the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars worth of games you spent money on.
Yeah. Although, side note with Steam, even though they do have games that they have delisted, if you did purchase them, as of right now, many of them, if I'm not mistaken, are still available for download and play. And
yeah, you can also look for they're the equivalent of the numbers you would see on a barcode. If you put them in the search bar, you can search for them and it'll come up as a delisted game, and if you bought it, you can re-download it.
Here's Jump Force, which is a delisted game I bought, but you can clearly see that I can still install it.
Yeah, I'm right.
I might actually do that just to play it again.
It was such a great game.
It was such a great
Okay,
game.
we're talking about digital game, right? So,
Yes.
one thing I need to add that you guys probably haven't mentioned yet is, there are games that are cloud stream game like PS Plus in order to play this. So we need that. Same thing for Nintendo, online. The reason I mentioned that because like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, you basically you're paying $60, right? For own it, you play all of the streaming cloud. Let's say, for example, if they ever to be Nintendo server where to shut down the Nintendo Online, I will lose access to the Guardians of the Galaxy game. Let's say if I bought it digitally, because it's the price it's too big.
Yeah, so Draco did mention that. So any game that requires an online check, which is most games now, whether physical or digital,
In 1/3.
anything that requires an online check would now be required to be able to be run offline. So like Guardians of the Galaxy could be run offline if they eliminated that check.
Not only if
Um,
they decide to fix that issue.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of going forward. So once these laws and bills have been passed, studios will be required to implement that into their roadmap of when they start building a game. So it wouldn't be an optional thing. It would be required. So you either do it or you don't release your game, kind of.
And okay, so even though it's only affecting California right now, I think eventually it's gonna affect the entire world. Cause most of the newer games, right, whether it's digital physical copy or the like AAA, AA and stuff, and the other games, eventually it's gonna affect every gamers that wants to play it, whether it's casual, hardcore, or whatever. And let's say if they remove it, but it's gonna affect a lot of people, and then we're gonna have to affect like
Yeah,
the
so-
world people.
Yeah, so that's what I've been saying. So it's not just California, but for California to succeed in turning this bill into law is very reliant on the EU setting their guidelines in place and being like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. There's no exceptions. And then when California decides to pass that bill into law, they've then got a better foothold, as opposed to if the EU says, you know what, this isn't really feasible. So we're not really going to do anything about it. And if California tried to do that, it might work for a couple of months, it might work for a couple of days, but it will end up failing if no one else adopts.
Okay, hold on. Now people make multiple accounts, right? So I'm pretty sure Sony, Nintendo, they're not a region locked like based on game and stuff. Let's say if I made a Japanese Nintendo account, so if I want to play some game that was only from Japan, I can do that. Pretty sure it's go because Nintendo, like I said, there's not region locks on that there's certain platform stuff that will be region locked.
So regions work slightly different. So regions encompass a wider area. So for example, if you put your Switch into Japan, you can access their library no matter where in Japan you are. And because it's Nintendo, you can also access it outside of Nintendo. There are certain background restrictions. But for California, because it's part of North America as a region, they can't shut down the whole region, but they can lock IP addresses associated with California. So even if you try to make an account that was based out of Japan, because your physical IP address through your internet isn't in Japan, you would still be locked out unless you're on a computer and you can use a VPN. That sort of gives you a little bit more wiggle room.
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually made a good point on that one, Ryu. Region-specific games, like for example, the world got Super Mario Brothers 2. Japan had Doki Doki Panic. Now, if using that as the example, if this law was to pass and game companies decided, okay, cool, we're going to back end of life services, yada yada yada, a game that is restricted to a very specific region, so a Japanese game only sold in Japan, then whatever law that Japan has for those types of games is the one that would apply, because since they're not selling this game on the global market, it would not affect those games. However, if Japan wanted to take Doki Doki Panic and sell it around the world, then they would, in this instance, have to capitulate with the laws in accordance to the rest of the world where they want to sell their game. So, and that's a good thing that you brought that up, because we did overlook that. And with that brings this episode to a close. What are your thoughts about the updates to the Stop Killing Games movement and the potential law passing in California? Let us know down below. Also, be sure to share, like, subscribe. You can catch us on Rumble or YouTube. We're also on X and on Blue Sky. And of course, we have a Discord. Come and join us, check us out, hang out, chat, chill out. And as always,
We'll see you in the next video.